Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome to Beverly Hills View. Our guest is Grammy Award-winning producer, lecturer, performer, and musician Peter Asher, who was born and raised in London. He went to Westminster School, which is on the grounds of Westminster Abbey, because when I was there for the David Hockney dedication of the Queen's Window, Wendy Asher, your wife,
Indeed,
pointed out your school.
That's right.
Said Westminster. And all these little boys were walking around. They had little uniforms on. And she said, I think Peter went to school there.
Yes, I did. It's true.
And then he went to King's College, where he studied philosophy. Peter has a long history in show business, starting with film, TV, radio, and stage. But we know him as half of the legendary singing duo Peter and Gordon from the 60s. They had 9 top 20 records during their career. So Peter and Gordon's debut single, A World Without Love, went to #1 in over 30 countries, including the United States and the United Kingdom. As if that weren't enough, he headed the Beatles record company, where he worked closely with them on their individual products. The 60s was a time of social change, and Peter, as part of the revolution, right, co-founded a bookshop and a gallery called Indica. In the 70s, moving to the United States, he started a music management company, and by the 90s was appointed senior vice president at Sony. He's hosted on radio, been the music supervisor to a Broadway show, which I saw, which I loved.
Bright Star? Oh,
Bright Star. I thought it was
much.
great.
That was fun.
When it was on Broadway. He produced work of great artists, but I'm going to stop, and I'm going to let him drop some of these big names that he's worked with. Hi, Peter.
Hi. Thank you for the amazing introduction.
So did you know that I had I saw your school?
No, I think Wendy did mention it, but I'd forgotten until you just told the story, yes.
So I'm with Peter Asher, CBE, which is Commander of the British Empire, and I have a picture of you being invested. Is that what they call it, invested?
Yes, it's an investiture. That's right.
In 2015.
Yep.
Tell us, look at your black tie and tails, or tails?
It's the morning coat, actually,
Morning
is what they call
coat,
it.
right?
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, it's very exciting. I mean, it's very silly and very English, in the sense that it doesn't really mean anything. Commander of what British Empire?
But it does
there
mean
isn't one left.
That you.
But no, it means a lot to us. It was the day you get the phone call is extremely exciting, because it's very cloak and dagger. I mean, somebody called up from the British consulate, and I know the people at the British consulate in LA, so that wasn't surprising.
Oh, they called from LA. Yeah.
They called from the LA
Right.
office, and said, and they started off by saying, "Are you alone? Can you talk freely?" You kind of go, "What is this?"
Really?
Going to be asked to spy for the empire.
Exactly.
And then they said, "No, Their Majesties decided to offer you a CB, and will you accept?" And I said, "Yes," immediately.
Right away,
I mean,
right?
No such qualms.
No thinking.
And that was it. I was thrilled, and you can't tell anybody
Oh, it's a
until it's
secret?
announced. Until the official list comes out.
So how long
They
did you
tell
have
you
to
in
wait?
advance, so you have the excuse me, the opportunity of declining if you. I mean, some people do.
Yes, I know somebody
And
did.
it's on principle. But no, it was very exciting, and you can't tell anyone. You're allowed to tell your wife, but swear her to secrecy. And Wendy was very good at keeping the secret.
So you were there in 2015 in
Yep.
March
Yep.
because Prince Philip, no, not Prince Philip, Prince William.
Yeah, gave me mine. Yeah, no sword, unfortunately. The sword you only get for a knighthood.
For a knighthood.
Yeah.
But so what did you do? Does he speak to you?
Oh yes, you chat for a while.
He says, you're a great musician. Thank you for helping.
That kind of thing. Yeah, that kind of thing. Yes.
I was there.
I mean, he's been given a few notes, obviously.
I was there in 2015 too, when Zandra Rhodes became a dame.
I love Zandra. Yes, no, she well deserved. Yeah.
And it was so exciting because you get to invite 3 people, and I was
That's
one
right.
of the 3 that she
Oh,
invited.
fantastic.
Yeah,
so you were in the palace.
I was in the palace. Because
That's
it
fantastic.
was really, it was interesting, and it was beautiful, and it was moving. The orchestra playing, and
Very
people
good.
walking,
Yeah.
wasn't it?
It's all great. No, they know how to organize that kind of thing. They really do.
Well, now we leave London and Buckingham Palace,
Yes.
Buck House.
Buck House, yes.
Buck House. And you moved to Beverly Hills when you first came to the U.S.
Yes, in 1970. 1970, I had found an artist in whom I believed very strongly, called James Taylor.
Oh.
I'd met him in London. He'd never made a record or done gigs or anything. Through a mutual friend of mine, and actually an LA friend called Danny Korchmar, a great guitar player, had given James my number. And he called me up out of the blue, introduced himself, came over to my house and played me some songs, and I was completely blown away. At the time, it so happened I was head of A&R for the Beatles record label, Apple, as you mentioned. So I signed him to Apple. But then when Apple started to fall apart, as indeed the Beatles themselves as a group were falling apart, or at least not getting on well, James and I decided to go back to America. I say back for him. For me, it was my first move. I'd been there, of course, as an artist on tour with Peter and Gordon. But,
you had been here touring.
We toured here a lot in the 60s, but I'd never moved here. So I moved to L.A. My first house was a rental house in Hancock Park on Longwood Avenue, $400 a month with a pool and a guest house. And but then as soon as I made some money, which is as soon as James made some money, the first house I bought was indeed in Beverly Hills.
Was in Beverly Hills.
Summit Ridge Drive.
Oh, it was.
It was Summit Ridge Drive. Actually, it was the house where Artie Shaw and Lana Turner lived, and where he wrote a piece of music called Summit Ridge Drive.
Oh, so that was perfect for you.
Which is very good. So I didn't even know that when I bought it, but I was thrilled when I found out.
And then, did you write anything there? Or do you write music?
I do write music. I probably did write some. I must have, yes.
But not Summit Drive, right?
And not Summit Ridge Drive. That was the Artie Shaw tune. And there was a hit for Artie Shaw. And and just the idea that he and Lana Turner lived there, I thought was exotic and interesting. But so I lived there for a long time. I loved Beverly Hills.
I'm so glad you're here, and I'm glad you were a part of Beverly Hills from London, from Buckingham Palace, with your CBE, and you're here with us today. So thank you.
And then eventually I moved to Malibu, where I live now.
But we're glad you're fine.
Beverly Hills is still an important place in my life, for sure.
So let's go way back, because I think you were pretty young when you started in the show business. How did that happen?
I was 8.
Yeah, pretty young.
My two sisters, I have two sisters, Jane and Claire. Jane is 2 years younger than me.
Oh, Jane
Claire
Asher.
is 2 years young. Yes, Jane Asher and Claire Asher. 2 years younger again. And we all three of us got signed up by a theatrical agent. I think probably because we evidently were kind of cute or something. And we all have red hair. And so I think they probably thought, well, we'll get all three of them in some, highly paid commercial or something. But that never happened. But Jane and I and Claire actually all started off acting. And my first film, I got off to a good start. My first film, my mother was played by Claudette Colbert, which I thought was very distinguished.
So you actually did get to act as a child.
Oh, a lot, yes. I did quite a lot. Claudette Colbert was my father, and Jack Hawkins, the English actor, was my father. Claudette Colbert was my mother in my very first film called The Planter's Wife. I did a number of films. I did a number of episodes of the old Robin Hood series, if you remember the old black and white.
Was your mother?
Richard Green.
Oh, yeah, Richard Green, right. Was your mother a stage mom?
No, not at all.
Then how did you three get involved?
Some agent saw us and kind of said to my mom, that they look... saleable.
So she said, okay.
Oh, yeah, my mother.
But it had nothing to do with music.
No, it had nothing to do with music. My mother was a professional musician. She was a classical musician.
What'd she play?
Was oboe. She played in various orchestras, and then she was oboe professor at the Royal Academy in London. My father was the doctor.
Your father was a doctor, so there was no music there, right?
Well, not in the business sense, but my mother, of course, was a very good musician, and my father was a decent amateur pianist. So there was a lot of music around.
But did your father insist that you go to university?
No.
Oh, he didn't. So I would.
No, I wanted to go to university, but I didn't finish because I went to King's College London, and before I'd finished my second year, we had a #1 record. So.
You were working then. You were Peter and Gordon then.
We were Peter and Gordon at school.
At Westminster. Not at Westminster.
Yeah, Gordon went to Westminster as well.
Oh,
That's where we met.
Oh.
Gordon and I met at school. We discovered we both played the guitar and sang, so we tried doing it together. Probably if we'd met two other people, we might have been a group, might have been a band like everybody else, but we didn't. And we started just doing it, the two of us with acoustic guitars, and it sounded okay. Oddly enough, we were actually Gordon and Peter back then.
You were Gordon and Peter.
It wasn't until EMI Records found us and signed us up that they said, we think Peter and Gordon sounds better. We're changing your name. And who was I to complain?
And what did he say? He didn't care.
Yeah, I don't think he was thrilled.
But you were like teenagers then, right?
Yes, we were. We made our first record. I was 20, Gordon was 19, I think.
Yeah, so that was...
And then that went to number one. So
was that your first record?
Yes. And by that time, I'd left school and was at King's.
And why were you studying philosophy then? Here you were.
Because it was the vaguest thing I could think of. I had no idea what I wanted to do. So I had to choose something. It was either give me that or kind of English or literature or something, something woolly. And I thought philosophy sounded very interesting. And it was. I enjoyed it very much. And I've run into quite a few friends of mine, oddly enough, studied philosophy as well. Steve Martin, for example, who's a great friend.
He studied philosophy?
He studied philosophy as well. So every now and then we can start talking about Immanuel Kant or something, should we so wish.
Exactly. We have a picture of you, Peter and Gordon, or Gordon and Peter. Mm-hmm. We're going to tell us where this is.
Yeah, that's some...
You both played guitar, right?
Yeah, we both played guitar. That's some TV show in America. I'm not sure which one. But I remember that picture. It's one. It's
and
one
your
of the big
red
TV
hair,
shows.
yeah. And the next one. This is very psychedelic.
Yeah, that might be Hullabaloo, I think.
Very psychedelic.
It might be Hullabaloo. It was one of those big American TV shows.
I'm interested in the next one because it was the Ed Sullivan show,
That was the Ed
right?
Sullivan show, yes.
Was that the first time?
Yes. It was interesting, actually. A quick story, an odd story. We didn't do Ed Sullivan show at the beginning when we first got here, because our first record, World Without Love, Bobby Rydell had covered it, sung it, made a record of it, the instant he heard it. So by the time it started to be a hit in England, somebody had sent him a copy, and he recorded it, put it out, and it went straight in the charts.
So he went right up, right?
Well, it jumped into the bottom of the charts, but he was on the Ed Sullivan show.
With your song?
And he did that song. So when we came over here, our record became the hit. We came over here, and we did a lot of television, but Sullivan said, no, sorry, we can't have the same song on 3 weeks later, so you're out of luck. So we didn't get to do that Sullivan show until
for a while.
A later single.
So Ed Sullivan, I just found out, lived in my house in Beverly Hills. His granddaughter came to the door and knocked and said, my mother was raised in your house. I thought my house was Oliver Hardy and Mac David, who's a musician.
Yes.
And it's a very happy house. And she said my mother spent her happiest, I guess she was 4 or 5 years old, in your house in Beverly Hills. And she had pictures of her mom Ed Sullivan coming up the walkway.
How very
so
cool.
we have this Beverly Hills connection here.
Exactly.
Who wrote that? Who wrote A World Without Love?
Paul McCartney. And
really? And they didn't sing it? You sang it?
Well, there's a long story there. And if you want me to launch into the long story.
I want to hear that, because that was your big springboard, right?
Yes, that was our first hit. Well, here's how it happened. There's actually 2 stories I have to tell, and they join up at the end. But I'll try and not make it too long. Gordon and I started singing together at Westminster. Then we started playing at parties and coffee houses and whatever gigs we could get. Eventually, we ended up, after a couple of years of that, in this place, the Pickwick Club, which was a late night sort of eating and drinking club where a lot of the cool actors of the day and stuff would go. It was kind of a hip place. That's the first time I met Michael Caine, and he was...
This is in the heart of London?
In the heart of London, in off the Charing Cross Road. Michael Caine, Terence Stamp, all
very cool, right?
David Hemmings, if you
Good
remember.
people.
When we were all young and beautiful. And so it was a good place. And one night we were spotted by a talent scout, A&R guy from EMI Records by the name of Norman Newell, who liked the way we sounded, asked us if we'd like to come on an audition for EMI. We did the audition. We passed. They signed us. We were thrilled. We thought that was amazing. And he said, I've booked some musicians for your first session. I picked several songs out of the ones you already do.
Oh, right.
We're not there yet. We're getting that. I picked several songs of the ones you normally do in your show that he'd heard us do when we just sat on bar stools with our acoustic guitars. But if you know any other songs that might be good to record, feel free to bring them to the first session. And I said, maybe I do. Here's why. My sister Jane had become, at that time, a very famous actress. We both started acting at the same time. My career kind of tapered off, shall we say politely, and Jane's continued. She left school at 15, took to acting full time.
Oh, she did.
Became a very successful and a big star. It was in that context that she, as a sort of celebrity, that she was invited by a magazine to go and see this band that everyone was freaking out over, that all the girls were screaming over.
Right.
When they did their first London gig. They'd just come down from Liverpool, had their first hit. Beatlemania was taking hold on Britain. Nothing in America yet. That came much later. So she agreed to do that. She went. They took her down to see the show. She thought the band was extremely good. She was taken backstage as the visiting celeb afterwards to meet them all. She liked them very much, thought they were charming and witty and funny and so on. She liked them, they liked her. One of them liked her in particular and asked her out. And that's how she ended up going out with Paul McCartney for several years. One of the side effects of that was that Paul was hanging around our house all the time. And eventually, our parents kind of took pity on him because he was always there and offered him the guest room in our house as a pied-à-terre if he wanted. So, and he accepted. So Paul moved in with us. The guest room was on the top floor of the house next to my bedroom. So we, for about 2 years, shared the top floor of our house in Wimpole Street in London. And one of the results of that was we became friends. I got to hear songs that were being worked on. And I occasionally got, of course, visit them even in the studio and watch those songs turn into records under the eye of George Martin, who I grew to greatly admire, and so on. But anyway, one of the songs I had heard was this song, World Without Love. And I'd mentioned to Paul that I liked it. And he explained that it was unfinished, that John didn't think much of it. The Beatles were not going to record it. It wasn't right for them. And he'd abandoned it. He sang me the 2 verses that existed, but that was it. And so then that's why when Norman said, do you know any other good songs you might be able to get your hands on? I kind of went, just a minute. And so that night I asked Paul if World Without Love was still an orphan song without a commitment, whether he played it to other people or finished it. He said, no, it's unfinished. You can have it. It's fine. And he wrote down the chords and the lyrics for me and
he did
made a little demo and taught me the song. So I said, well, can we record it? Because we've got a record deal now. Because I really like that song. I think we could work out a harmony version that might be cool. And he said, fine, you can have it. So I did have to nag him slightly as the session grew near to finish it.
Oh, I was going to say, did you finish it or did he finish it?
I wish. A co-write with Paul McCartney, that would serve me very well. No,
but you were sleeping in the rooms next to each other.
We were. But eventually, that's a good point, actually. If he hadn't finished it, maybe I could have got away with that. But no, he finally took his guitar and went into his bedroom for an infuriatingly short, like 6 minutes, literally.
Oh, really? Like finish this whole
Came out
great thing?
with the bridge, so I wait and in a while I will see my true love. That bit of the song,
right.
which is beautiful, and finished it. So we went in the studio, recorded it, and by the end of that session, we'd done about 6 songs, but there was no doubt in anyone's mind that World Without Love was going to be our first single. Came out, went to number 1 in England, and as you say, number 1 all over the place, all over Europe, and finally, to our utmost incredulity, it was number 1 in America. It was actually the first non-Beatles number 1 of the so-called British invasion.
How could you handle that? 2 young guys. I mean,
very well. I mean, it's what's not to handle? Suddenly, I mean, we'd been dreaming of going to America all our lives.
So that was
for a start.
I got it.
The thing you have to remember about the British invasion, it was all based on our love for American music. Nobody was doing English songs until they started writing their own.
I see.
It was all American music. I had pictures of the posters of the New York skyline on my wall. I had copies of Downbeat with all the jazz clubs I'd go to as soon as I got to New York.
As soon as you got there.
So, and I knew I was going somehow.
So
anyway, the record's number 1.
Right.
What that meant to us was they can't stop us now. We're going.
We're going.
And same thing, by the way, when the Beatles got the same phone call 6 months earlier that I Want to Hold Your Hand was number 1. They were most excited about the fact they would go to America.
And then they got to
back
go,
then
right.
It was a really far away, expensive place.
But they were ahead of you, right?
Oh, yes.
And how did Paul feel about your song, his song being number 1 like that?
He was thrilled. I mean, he was thrilled. People sometimes say that, didn't they wish they'd kept it or anything? No, not at all.
No, he was happy.
here's something interesting. If you read any of the interviews with the Beatles back from that time, one of the questions we all got asked, for sure, you could rely on it being a question always, is what are you going to do when this is all over?
Oh,
Because
that's
they were confident that a rock and roll career was kind of a 2-year
just
enterprise,
finished,
and that was
right.
it. You know, you'd have to go back to being a milkman or whatever you'd been job you had
Serving
before.
tables, right?
Exactly. So, but they would answer that question by saying, we will be songwriters. Because they admired, their heroes were not just Elvis and Eddie Cochran and the stars. Their heroes were Goffin and King, Lieber and Stoller,
The writers,
Barry Mann and
Lieber
Cynthia
and
Weil, the writers. They looked upon that as a separate and an almost more serious career in a way. So
Well, it was, wasn't
so
it?
for them to achieve a #1 record with somebody else was perfect for them. There was no regret on their part. They were delighted. Who better? I mean, people goes, oh, but you know, you knocked the Beatles off #1. We didn't knock them off. I mean, they went down
Yeah.
and we went up, and yes, we were the next #1. But what better than to be replaced by a song that you wrote? So anyway,
Exactly.
when all that happened, Gordon and I knew we'd get to go to America. So how did we handle it? I mean, we dreamed of going to New York forever. So to go to New York, see all these fabulous places, and be chased around everywhere by screaming teenage girls trying to tear our clothes off, life could not be any better than that. You know, there was not any problem handling it.
That was fantastic. Really
great.
fantastic. And so that was the excitement of the 60s or the 70s?
60s.
That was the
That
60s.
Oh yeah, 64.
And
World
did you
Without Love
travel
came out.
other places then?
Oh,
Were you
everywhere.
traveling?
Yes. I mean, LA was thrilling. I mean, LA was, because LA actually, I knew I wanted to go to New York, but LA was magical to us. You know, the whole thing about California girls, which is true.
Oh, right.
And,
The surfing.
all that stuff. I mean, no, I remember distinctly, you know, because you got to remember, like a year earlier, or a couple of years earlier, I'd been bicycling home from school in the rain at 4 o'clock in the afternoon in the dark, if it was
From
winter.
Westminster Abbey, right?
From Westminster School. You know, it's dark at 4 o'clock. It's freezing. You're bicycling home from
And
school.
here you are.
2 years later, you're in a Mustang convertible, driving down Sunset Strip, being recognized by beautiful blondes.
Okay, I got it.
And you kind of go, this is better.
This is better. Then why didn't you stay together forever?
Well, that's a difficult question. We never actually broke up. We didn't have a terminal fight. We didn't make that decision. We both wanted to do other things. I was becoming increasingly interested in being a record producer.
Oh, you were.
And then, of course, and then in that context, that's when I got offered the job at Apple. So, I had plenty of other things to do. Gordon,
And what did he do?
he made a record on his own, which unfortunately didn't do that well. And he ended up having doing a lot of different things. He moved to Australia for a while.
Oh, I see. But
He
then
was he was on stage himself.
But you two got together 37 years later
We
for a
did.
charity, which was great.
Well, we thought that, I confess, as the decades zipped by,
Right.
that we would not sing together again. We'd never officially said, that's it, never
You
again.
never did, so
But
you did make
it
a
was
return.
it was a reasonable assumption after 35 years. But at, as you say, 37 years after we'd stopped, was actually Paul Schaefer,
Oh, right.
you know, the
from
keyboard player
right,
from the
right.
Letterman show, brilliant, amazing musician and a good friend of mine, who was putting together a benefit for a friend of his.
Oh, that's what he
and
did.
and he wanted to make it a British Invasion themed benefit because his friend was Mike Smith from the Dave Clark Five, who needed help. And he called me up and said, what would it take to get you and going back together for one show? And he told me the cause, and I knew Mike Smith had been a great friend of Gordon's. And I knew that Paul Schaefer would put together an impeccable show with a great band. And so I knew that if ever we were going to do
This was
a one-off, this was the one to do. So I called Gordon, who was keen, and I said yes. That was
great.
it. We did have to spend some time
Rehearsing.
rehearsing.
No
Exactly.
farewell tours after
No.
that. Farewell, farewell, farewell.
Exactly. But no, that's what happened. That we enjoyed doing that, and people seemed to like it. And so we kind of went, okay, well, look, if there's a market for this, we'll do shows whenever they fit in. So we did. We did quite a few more.
Oh, you did a few
yes.
farewell tours.
Oh, no, we did. We never called it a farewell tour.
No.
We didn't know it was a farewell tour until Gordon died. But we would just do shows whenever interesting offers came our way that we thought would be fun to do. I was very busy with a lot of other stuff.
You were doing other things.
Yes.
But take me back to Indica. Why
Yeah.
to open a bookstore?
Well, was an idea of these two friends of mine, Barry Miles, who was in the book business and a writer, who is a successful writer to this day. He wrote the McCartney biography, that's the big one, and he's very good. And a friend of ours, John Dunbar, who studied art at Cambridge and knew a bit about the art business. We had this idea, I think Miles may have started it, to start a bookshop and an art gallery. I was more interested in the bookshop. I'm not a big art person.
Because I was going to say, who'd you show in the art gallery?
We had some major people at one time.
Oh, you
or another.
did?
Yeah, we had Klaus Oldenburg. We had.
Oh, you did?
Le Parc, who just won the Venice Biennale.
So was it a big space?
No.
It wasn't a big space.
Quite small space. It was in Mason's Yard of St. James's, where the White Cube is now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And of course, most famously, we had Yoko there. That's
Mason's Yard, right.
That's why Yoko and John met. Was
there
at Indica.
At Indica?
Yes. No,
So what kind of books did you have?
Well, there were two different places. The bookshop was on Southampton Row. And a little while later, we opened the art gallery.
I see. They weren't together.
No.
I see.
The name Indica, of course, we took from the plant cannabis indica, which some amateur botanists may be familiar with its curious properties. But we were trying to be in counterculture.
Yes, you were.
City Lights
right?
bookshop.
And you were actually.
Hippie bookshop. Oh, we were. William Burroughs came and spoke. Allen Ginsberg came.
Yeah.
It was a happening place. It did readings in the bookshop and so on, and then, so it was exciting. I mean, the bookshop did okay. We kept it going for a while.
Actually, you did.
Well, we didn't. We were very unbusinesslike.
But
I mean, if we had a good day, we'd scoop it all out of the till and go and have dinner.
Good,
and
together.
And accountants don't necessarily, smile on those kind of practices.
But that was good. That was a
good.
revolution, right?
It was exactly. No, and the International Times, which was the counterculture newspaper of that era, was published in the basement of Indica.
Oh, it was.
And Paul McCartney was there a lot. He was a big Indica fan.
So it really was.
And as I say, when the gallery was happening, we invited the Beatles to the private viewing of Yoko's first exhibition, and that's when John came down and met her.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So you were the catalyst. You're the catalyst for a lot of things.
Well, of course, some pessimistic Beatle historians have said, well, being responsible for John meeting Yoko makes you partly responsible for the breakup of the Beatles, but I reject that interpretation.
I reject that, too.
I think Yoko is extremely cool. She was cool then, and she's cool now. I'm proud to know her.
They just did something at Disney Hall, the Flexus.
Oh,
and
yeah?
she was part of it.
Right.
Some of her writings were part of it.
Yeah, she's super cool.
In fact, there was a table with pieces of paper where you drew a circle, and it said, draw your circle, put your name, and mail it to Yoko in New York. It had
brilliant.
her address on it.
Oh, I should have done that.
Yeah, it was really interesting.
Yes.
So you moved to here in the 70s to become, and you became a personal manager.
I moved here because of James, yes.
What does a personal manager do?
Whatever's necessary. You try to take care of everything involved in an artist's career. You try to make sure that what they're doing is okay with them and at the same time is going to be
Do you
effective.
pick music?
Well, that's more the producer. But I was the producer as well. Yes. I was both. But so as the record producer, you're directly involved in what records they make. Yes, as a manager, you're involved in everything.
Like personal appearances?
Yes,
and
everything.
Okay, and then you were a senior VP at Sony. What kind of duties were those?
Well, that was much later, of course. That was after the management company had been going for 30 years.
Yeah, but I just wondered what a VP does there.
Well, it's a big corporation, so you fit in. I mean, I was one of the 5 or 6 vice presidents of Sony Music, which is the parent company of the record labels.
I see.
So Columbia Records and Epic can do. I ended up working especially with a lot of overseas stuff because
you knew everybody.
Because the record labels themselves tend to run themselves a bit. Tommy Mottola was eventually my boss, and
I see.
Tommy hired me, but even Tommy didn't really tell Columbia and Epic so much what to do, but the rest of the world would look to us for direction, particularly, except for, of course, Japan, who were our bosses.
Who were?
Our bosses.
Oh, because they owned the company?
Yeah, that's right. Japan ruled everything.
But did they put input? Did they have input?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
sometimes
they did?
We'd go over there and have meetings and stuff, and, like any company, ultimately, And then, of course, they appointed my friend Howard Stringer was.
Oh, right. He was great.
He was great. He was the head of Sony.
He was so nice.
In Japan.
Yeah.
So I loved Howard. Yeah.
Very nice. Okay, we've talked about so much. We're going to take a break.
Okay.
Do you still have more to tell us?
Oh, but as much as you like. As you've discovered, I can drone on forever. So, but you tell me.
We're going to take a break. We're going to be right back with Peter Asher, so don't go away.
Looking for these? You drive buzzed. It could be one very expensive ride.
First, you gotta make bail. Then pay me to get your car back.
Your insurance premiums will go through the roof.
And my legal fees just keep adding up. All told, it could end up costing you $10,000.
Buzzed, busted, and broke. Because buzz driving is drunk driving.
So good to see you guys. So, what's up?
Oh, we finally bought a place.
Holy cow.
You seriously have enough saved to do that?
We've been putting a little aside each month.
Jeez, at the end of the month, we have nothing left to save.
Yeah, I have no idea where it goes.
Well, you're spending a lot on...
Is it good?
Oh, God.
Oh, how is my account overdrawn?
When it comes to financial stability, don't get left behind. Get tools and tips for saving at feedthepig.org.
Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome back to the Beverly Hills View. I'm here with musician Peter Asher, who's going to tell us about his 14 Grammy Award producing recordings.
Yes, I've won three Grammys myself. I won the Producer of the Year Grammy a couple of times. Yes, you're right. That number is that I've produced 14 records that won Grammys.
And won Grammys.
Yeah.
Okay. So who were those Grammy winners?
Oh gosh, Linda Ronstadt won a lot.
Okay, yeah, she won a lot.
Because in Linda's case, I won. You know, she made rock and roll albums. She made the Nelson Riddle albums. She made mariachi albums.
And you produced all
and
those.
I produced all those. And that means that in different years she came up in different categories. So she won Best Mariachi Album.
Oh right, I remember that so well.
We did three of those. Canciones de mi Padre, which won a Grammy, and the albums with Nelson Riddle, which were kind of those American songbook albums. She won a Grammy for those, and not to mention the rock and roll records, for which she won several Grammys. So,
and then
so Linda accounts for a lot of them. James Taylor accounts for a number of them, and a few others. The most recent one was the Steve Martin, Edie Brickell album that I did.
I want to talk about that.
Won a Grammy.
That was Bright Star. Was that?
Well, no, Bright Star.
They wrote that, right?
They wrote that, yeah, but it came from songs that they wrote for an album project we did together.
So Bright Star came from the album project?
Yes.
I see. Okay, tell me.
And then there was the Bright Star album later.
So in '89, and we're going to talk about that Steve Martin Broadway show because you were a musical advisor on that or whatever. In 1989, you were honored as producer of the year.
Yes.
So you got a Grammy.
Yes.
And does it just happen for that 1 year, or is it an accumulation of years, or what happens?
The producer of the year is awarded for the body of work you've done that year.
Oh, just that year?
Yeah, and that's the one I've actually won twice. Luckily.
Oh, you have one?
About 10 years apart. But I still want to win a third one.
What do we do?
I'm deeply greedy.
So what does it take to be a producer? You know, if someone wants to be a producer, someone's watching the show right now, and he said, I want to be a record producer. What does he have to know?
Well, now, the majority of record producers now work on a laptop, and come up with it. Even if you're eventually going to bring in a bunch of live musicians, you start, which I tend to do too. Start now.
Oh, you do too?
Yeah.
You've moved to that?
Yes.
And before, where did you do it?
Before you would decide how you what kind of record you wanted to make.
Yeah, and then where would you go?
Musicians and in a studio.
Into a studio?
Yeah.
The same studio, or do you have a studio at your house, or what happens?
I don't have one at my house. But back in the day, you needed. I mean, a home studio wasn't that much help to you. You'd have to go into a real studio in order to record real musicians.
And were there a lot of studios around here that you could go into, or do you have special ones, or?
I have favorites, but there's tons, and some of them have gone under since.
That's because of the laptop.
Yes.
Okay.
But a number of the good ones still exist. And they're still. I like both. I mean, I'm happy now, but whereas it used to be, a band or somebody would book 3 months in a real recording studio.
That's what I wondered. Yeah.
Now you tend to work those couple of months in a little nook somewhere, or in a bedroom, or in a home studio.
With a.
And then eventually go into the big room for a few days.
So
There's also budgets.
So
to
what does a
distribute.
producer have to know? Does he have to be a musician? Does he?
Not necessarily. There are some producers who are musicians, some who are engineers, and know all about recording technology, but now some who are computer geeks. Any and all of the above is helpful, I think. You need some degree of musical knowledge, I think.
Do you have
Although
to go
there's
to
some
a?
producers who don't.
Do you have to go to a record company, or to be a producer, or
Well-
do you do it on your own, or what? What do you do?
Well, I know that sounds like a simple question, but it involves a lot of different. I mean, you have to go to a record company if you want somebody to pay for it.
Right. Okay. Right. Okay. That's a point.
But if you don't need anyone to pay for it, you don't have to go to a record company.
I see. I
But
see.
because you don't now necessarily need a record company to put it out.
Oh, you don't.
No.
No.
It used to be when I started making records, without a record company, you were dead in the water because that was the only way anyone was ever going to hear your music. But now you yourself can get your record up on iTunes and Spotify and anywhere else you want it to be. And if it's really good, and if you can find a way of getting it to stand out from the other 20 billion people loading their music onto iTunes at that same second, then you can succeed.
Then you see.
And it can happen. It does happen.
It does happen,
But
right?
of course, it happens to 1 in a million people.
Oh wow.
But it's very hard. So in one way, the music business has got easier. So it's much easier to get your music in front of people than it used to be.
Right.
But the downside is just as easy for everybody else.
For everyone else.
So the competition is extreme.
So let's go back to the old days then.
Yeah,
I
by all
have
means.
some pictures of some of the artists that you
Okay.
did. Elton John, I think. We're
Yeah,
gonna
Elton.
bring up.
I've actually not produced Elton himself that much. Elton contributed to a Randy Newman album I did some time ago called Faust, and Elton's been a great friend for a long time. I remember seeing him at the Troubadour, the famous time when he first played here at the Troubadour, and I knew him then. Elton remembers this. The day after the opening night at the Troubadour, he came over to my house where James Taylor was staying, and that's the first time they met.
Oh, really?
Which I'd forgotten. Elton reminded me of that story the other day. And then most recently, I've done a couple of albums with Elton of sort of tribute albums, other people doing his songs. We did a Goodbye Yellow Brick Road tribute on the 30th anniversary of that record. And then more recently, we did another compilation tribute album as a tribute to the 50th anniversary of his songwriting partnership with Bernie Taupin.
That's a long time,
doing
isn't
a bunch
it?
of those songs. And I got in that instance, I got to work with a bunch of different people, including some new people. But I'm a huge Elton fan. I think he's a genius. And,
He is, isn't he?
And a brilliant man and a remarkable man as well. He's
Just-
achieved so much personally, and his whole AIDS effort is just
he's done so much
without
for-
parallel. I mean, it's
Exactly.
massive.
So who else do we have? We talked about James Taylor.
Yeah, who have we got?
Let's see. What other people do we have bring up? Oh, Cher, our favorite.
Cher, I did a bunch of records with Cher. Yeah, she's great. I mean, she's.
I just
she's
saw
amazing.
the Cher show on Broadway.
I haven't seen it.
I saw
I've got to
and-
go and see it.
And Bob Mackie did all the costumes, which was perfect.
fantastic.
And 3 people play her. They sound just like her.
Yeah.
It's just so great.
Because her voice is so distinctive. One of the things I love about Cher is the minute she opens her mouth and sings a note, you know who it is.
You know who it is.
It's
And how can these girls do the same, make you think that they're...
practice, I guess. I don't know. But
And Diana Ross, another favorite.
Diana's, I'm a huge fan. We had a couple of huge hits. The song called "When You Tell Me That You Love Me" was a big hit for
She's
Diana and me.
fantastic. She lived
She's
in Beverly
amazing.
Hills.
Well, I mean, I remember the first time I worked with her because I knew her. I met the Supremes when we were all on Hullabaloo together.
Oh, you
in
were?
1965.
Oh,
and,
wow.
And of course, that was thrilling for us because we were all huge Motown fans. And so meeting them, and they were all just so stunningly beautiful and great.
And so
we were just,
great
and
voices, right?
amazing. But then when finally Diana and I did an album together, I distinctly remember, first of all, even though I knew her, you'd heard slightly scary stories about she could be very demanding in the studio, very fierce. And
Oh, right.
Not at all. She was completely charming and great. I mean, you wouldn't want to screw up. I have a feeling if you...
But she's so
You know,
good.
you-
People
but-
see her at the market all the time, no makeup.
Yeah, no,
you
she's
know.
amazing. And she's gorgeous, too.
She's
With or without
beautiful.
makeup. But I remember distinctly the first time I worked with her, she goes out in the studio to do a vocal, and the minute she starts singing, you kind of go, oh my God, it sounds just like Diana Ross.
I know, isn't that
It's
great
like
when you
all
do
those
that?
Supremes records you grew up learning.
You knew that, right?
There she is,
Right.
and she does every take slightly differently. She's a breathtakingly good singer.
So
She's
we were really
amazing.
happy when she lived in Beverly Hills because we could drive
Yep.
by her house and then spot her once in a while.
Yes.
Zandra has a great story, Zandra Rhodes, because she had been to dinner with her the night before, and she saw Diana going into her house. I think it was on Maple, and she went over to say hello to her, and Diana said, "Don't come any closer. I'm going to close the garage door on you," and then Sandra was like stunned. Why is she acting like this? And then it turned out that here was Sandra with her green hair, but when Diana had met her, she had a turban on, so she
Right,
didn't see
right,
it.
of course.
So she thought it was some hippie
Yeah. No, she
stalking her.
That's what
and
I
then
mean.
she called us the next day. She called Sandra at my house and said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't know who you were."
Yeah, no, Diana's amazing.
So that was great. We have Carole King.
Yeah, Carol. I was a fan of Carol long before I met her because as a songwriter.
She's a great songwriter,
Because
right?
don't forget she wrote "Will You Still Love Me Tomorrow" for the Shirelles when she was 18.
Can you imagine?
18.
And her story on Broadway was great too.
Oh, great!
Beautiful.
I loved it.
Right.
No, you probably know that she didn't go and see it for the first
for a long
6
time, but
months.
she got the Medal of Honor or something in Washington, right? And then
Yeah, but she went. When they decided to do the show, she went to one early reading and kind of left. She said, "This is really great. You guys are doing great. I can't watch it."
Because she's shy, right?
Well, it was more that I think watching, the difficult episodes in your life, your cheating husband and all
true.
that, was not necessarily fun for her. So she didn't want to do it. And finally, because I went to the opening in New York, and I was texting Carol in the interval going, "This is a smash. You've got to see it." And eventually she did come and see it. As you probably know, she got fully made up in proper movie quality disguise so she could sit in the audience and watch it. And then came out the curtain call at the end as Carol. And even the cast didn't know she was there.
Is that
They
right?
were crazy. It was brilliant.
I know, that's fabulous. And earlier we talked about Steve Martin, who studied philosophy, you said.
Yes.
And he wrote that Bright Star.
Well, he was he's a great banjo player, as you probably know. And he also writes on the banjo very well. He's done quite a lot of writing. He did the music for Shakespeare in the Park one year, and it was all really great and so on. So he and Edie Brickell collaborated on these songs that were based on banjo pieces that Steve had
Well, that
written.
was a piece that you produced, the record,
Yes,
the album.
Steve
that you
wrote these
produced.
little banjo tunes. Edie added these amazing melodies and lyrics on top of them, not just putting lyrics to them, but adding whole new melodies. And Steve played them to me at dinner in New York at his house one evening. And I said, "These are great, these are amazingly good." And Edie's such a good singer. Said, "You should make an album. You have to make an album of these." And you and Edie. And I started talking about the kind of record I thought it should be. Not just a bluegrass record, but a more. And it was actually, I was on the plane home the next day, and Steve emailed me and said, "Do you want to produce the album?" I went, yes.
Oh, perfect.
And so we did those couple of Steve and Edie, but not Steve and Edie. Thank you.
Steve and Edie lived in Beverly Hills, too.
Exactly.
We love them.
We love them. And it was ironic that I was doing Steve and Edie.
Steve and Edie, but the same names, right?
Different spellings, same names. And so then those songs, they had the idea of turning into a stage musical, and that's what they did.
And I thought the musical was great.
I loved it. And I got
loved
to produce the album of the stage musical, which was
And you were part of that musical. And it was great, and it did go on tour, right?
It did. Yes. It toured for about a year, just stopped recently.
Well, I think we can talk and talk and talk and talk. I don't know what's in the future for you.
More of the same, I think. I mean, I've got a lot of production projects in mind I'm working on. I do a lot of work with Hans Zimmer, the movie composer genius. And we're working on some songs for an animated film at the moment that's coming out in 2020, and so on.
And do you sing? Do you still sing?
Oh, yes. I go out on the road quite often, do shows where I tell some of these stories.
You do?
Yes.
Oh,
yeah.
Will you let us know when
Of
so we
course.
can come watch you?
Absolutely, I will.
Do you use your guitar?
Yes. Oh, I play and sing, and tell stories.
Peter Asher is our person. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you very much. This was fun.
And thank you for watching the Beverly Hills View today. We had so much fun. See you next time.
Thank you.